Okay, good evening. Hope you're doing well. I got Rabbi Brandis on we got a crowd. We're good. So we have an extra. Oh yeah. So we're starting at the bottom of Samach Tes Amud Aleph. We're gonna learn a Mishnah that is itself pretty straightforward, but as we try then to dig in to understand why each Shita holds the way they do, we'll see some complex drushas, contrasting the word treifa from three different psukim and how to learn one possibly causes a domino effect of how we learn another. So let's do the relatively easy part first. We're starting at a new Mishnah on the bottom of Samach Tes Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah as follows: Malak, let's say that a Kohen did Malika and Venimtses Treifa, and after the fact, so after they, right, when you go to Shlachtas, they shecht, and then they check the lungs, and then they checked for all the different types of Treifa. So Malak, Venimtses Treifa, this is a machlokes tonight. Rav Meir Omer, Eino Metame Bevei Sablia, meaning that the Malika was able to remove the nevela status. Okay, so the animal, as far as we knew, was good to go. The Kohen does Malika, and then after the Malika, they see, oh, it's a treifa. So it's usher to eat because of it's a treifa, right? But what if you do eat it anyways? Would you become Tamei al Nevela? No, you would not. Because he holds that the Malika can remove the Nevela status. That's the Shita of Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda Omer mitame. He says that if you do Malika and it turns out that it's a treifa, lemaisa, you're still going to be tame. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, excuse me, Dibur Hamaschil, Reb Yehuda Omer mitame. Look at the lamdas here. Delo mahanya Malika letreifa. So now you can already see kind of like the ikar machlokes between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is whether or not the mechanics, the pu'ula of Malika has an impact. Do we say that, okay, it's a treifa, but Lamaisa, I'm talking about Nevela, and therefore Malika helps Nevela? Or no, like Rabbi Yehuda wants to say, what are you doing? The animal's already a treifa. You haven't done anything. The animal's dead in the water. So that's Shita number two. And let's first see a dialogue in the Mishnah here at the top of Samach Tes Amud Beis between the two of them, Amar Rav Meir, Kal v'chomer. I have a beautiful svara, says Rav Meir, as to how I know that Malika does work when it comes to treifa. Im nevelas behema. When we were talking about birds in our Mishnah. So by birds, the only time you could ever become a tamei by nevela is by swallowing a bebe sablia. So he says im nevelas behema. When we talk about large animals, shemitama b'maga uvamasa, that when they are a nevela, you can become tamei, of course, by touching them, but even by carrying them. And there, by those large animals, we say, shchitasa mitaheres treifasa mitumasa. There, by the large animals, we say that the shchita can take a treifa from its tumas nevela. There's a lot of terminologies here that even though it's a treifa, it still can remove the nevela status through shchita. Then nevela sa'of, then a bird which has a lesser status of nevela, she'eno metame b'maga uvamasa, that by birds there is no tame tumas nevela touching a bird or even carrying a bird. I should say carrying or even touching. Eno din shetesh chitaso mitaheres treifaso mitumaso. Obviously, this is our kal v'chomer and only stage one. The stage one of this kal v'chomer is that obviously, if we're going to say that shchita can remove the nevela status from a cow, then pashut that shchita can remove the nevela status from a bird. Obviously, if it works on something greater, pashut it'll work on something lesser. That's step one. That's a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer followed by a hekesh. Anyone have some PTSD from those Gemaras we learned? Because I do. Says the Gemara, Mematzinu, not only do we know that we have our kal v'chomer, but we also have a hekesh. Mematzinu b'shchitaso shima machsharto le'achila umetaheres treifaso mitumaso. Just like we know that shchita can make a food kosher and can remove the nevela status from a treifa, af milikaso shim machsharto be'achila titaher treifaso mide tumaso. So this is the double stat.
Maksher for Achila.
In Beis Hamikdash for Chat HaSa'of. The Chat HaSa'of did not none of the Chat HaSa'of went on the Mizbeach. The Ola Sa'of did. Yeah, it was eligible for the Kohanim. We learned that. That was one of the distinctions. if you'll recall, remember we were talking about being mavdil the neck. We were talking about so there. The Mishnah said, I guess a 7, 8, 9 blot ago, said that the olah sa'ov you took the head of the olah, you dipped it in salt that was on the mizbech, and then you tossed it, and then you did the same thing to the body. But by the chatas was actually edible, so it was matir the meat to be eaten. Anytime malika was done, it was a matir for the meat. But you're correct that with the olah, we never consumed it.
Right.
Yeah. So here, this is what the Mishnah stages as a two-stage argument. It's the kal v'chomer that we know if shchita works by a behema to be matir, shchita works by a bird. And then the hekish extends it from shchita to malika. That's how Rav Meir develops his shita. And then the last shita of the Mishnah is the shita of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Omer, we don't have to be so categorical that either it works for animals and birds or it doesn't work for animal and birds, because Rav Meir, look at his kal v'chomer. It works for animals and it works for birds. Rabbi Yehuda is not having any of it. The whole thing is matame, even birds. So then Rabbi Yossi, he splits the difference. Chevra, stop fighting. We're gonna live in the middle camp. Daya kinevelas behema shchitasa metaharta v'lo malikasa. Okay, shchita is a matir. Malika is not a matir. So we have these three shitas. Let's just review the Mishnah outside. The Mishnah taught us about a case of malak v'nimtzeis treifa. Rabbi Yehuda says the malika removes the nevela status. Reb Meir says that the malika removes the nevela status. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it doesn't. That Rashi on the top to lo mahanya malika l'treifa. And then Rabbi Yossi threads the needle and says, yeah, shchita is a matir, but malika is not a matir. That brings us to the end of the Mishnah and the open of the Gemara, and we're actually going to start with a bit of a technical piece here, which is that Rabbi Yossi was of the opinion of this principle called dayo. We've learned about dayo before in Shas. I don't remember what Masechta was. Anybody remember? I don't remember. We did learn about that. Maybe Psachim. It was a long time ago. Yeah. So dayo means basically that we can split things in half. And let's see how this works. Says the Gemara, Verav Meir lo darish dayo. Rabbi Yossi has a svara. Rabbi Yossi's svara is that he has daya. Okay, shchita works, but who says malika works? And if daya works for Rabbi Yossi, it should also work for Rabbi Meir. Why does he say that? V'hadayo deoraisahu, because the application of dayo is not like an arbitrary application. It's a din deoraisa. That we have such a din called dayo. It's shteit in chumash. Says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down to Tanya. The Brisa reads as follows. This Brisa is in Baba Kama and in Baba Basra, as you can see on the sides. Midin kal v'chomer ketzad. Where do we see the concept of a kal v'chomer in the Torah? Because the pasuk says in Sefer Bamidbar, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ve'aviha yarok yarak befaneha, halosi kalem shivas yamim tisager shivas yamim michutz lamachane ve'achar te'aseh." So the pasuk says that Hashem says to Moshe that V'avia yarak b'faneh, that she spit in one's face, referencing something that she had done wrong. Miriam had done wrong, and she became a mitzoras kisheleg. So she had done something wrong, and the Gemara then says kal v'chomer l'shchina arba asar yom. Tosfos deals with how we got to 14 days. Beautiful svara, actually, if you look at Tosfos there, because there are three partners, each partner. So let's say a person was not nice in front of their father 7 days, you're not nice in front of another partner, another 7 days. So that's why the Baalei Tosfos get to 14. But we see a kal v'chomer. Yet that's not how we paskin. We don't say 14 days if you're mechutzav to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, ella. And this is the din d'oraisa. Daya lavo min adin liyos kinidon. Even though there's a kal v'chomer, but the punishment is going to be the same. So this is an application midoraisa of dayo. You're right. We could have said all the way, but we didn't. We had a kal v'chomer, but we said dayo. So we see that dayo is a principle that's midoraisa. So therefore, Rav Yossi, who utilizes the principle of dayo, that works out very nicely because Rabbi Yossi says that shchita is a matir for nevela, but malika is not a matir for nevela. But according to Rav Meir, you need to split. You should be willing to say, just like Rabbi Yossi, that shchita is a matir, but not malika. How does Rav Meir get away with saying that malika is a matir? After all, if you say dayo, you should have said just like Rabbi Yossi. So says the Gemara, let me tell you why Rav Meir holds the way that he does. Amar Rav Yossi beRebbi Avin. Reb Meir kra ashkach v'kadarash. He has a pasuk, and the pasuk that we're going to learn is a pasuk over here from Vayikra Yud Aleph. The pasuk says, "Zos Toras habehema v'ha'of." All right, follow along for the drasha here. The pasuk says that this is the halachos of the behema and the chicken. Now we have already learned today that there's a difference between a behema and a chicken. There are many differences between them. Here's one. V'chi be'eza Torah, with what halacha shavsa behema la'ov, of behema? How are you comparing these two things? They're so not similar when it comes to halacha. Behema, when it comes to a behema that's nisnabla, if it's a nevela, metama b'maga uvemasa, as we've learned. That if let's say there's an animal that's a nevela and I touch it, I'm tame because of the tumas nevela. Certainly if I touch it and even if I pick it up. But an oaf, eino metame b'maga uvemasa. Even if an animal became a nevela, let's say I went hunting and I shot a bird, good shot, and the animal is dead, and I pick it up. That's nevela. It's nisnabla. The animal died because of me. So then the Gemara says that's not the same as behema. So what does the Torah mean when it says that shavsa behema la'of? They're not the same. And also, there's another difference between birds and animals. Of metame begadim abeis habliya. When it comes to a bird, when does the moment of tuma occur? When you swallow the food. But behema eino metame begadim abeis habliya. Let's say that I force-fed you, nevela. You're not tameh, because the tumah has nothing to do with the beis habliya. That's a din that's exclusive to oaf. So no matter how you look at it, there are so many differences between oaf and behema. What does, says Rav Meir, what does the pasuk mean when it says zos toras ha-behema v'ha-oaf? Elolomar lach, why did the Torah compare oaf and behema? To teach you the following. Ma behema davar shemach shiur le'achila mitaher treifasa mitumasa. What is the common halacha between the two? That just like by a behema, the shchita allows you to eat and also removes the nevela status from a treifa. Af of davar shemachshir be'achila metar treifaso mitumaso. So he says that when the Torah says that zos taras habehema ve'of, it teaches me that the halachos are the same in both in regards to the removal of the status of nevela. That which is machshir behema for achila, namely shchita, is able to remove the status of nevela. So too by a bird, that which is matir the bird to eat is also, in regards to the case of a treifa, going to remove the nevela status. That is his shita. Now what we're going to do is learn that was the easy. That's easy. That was like pretty clear from the drasha. All right, we saw that the Torah made a comparison built into the pasuk. So it's Torah sabehema v'aof. Now we need to learn shitas Rabbi Huda. Just as a frame, there are three different psukim that we're going to see, and I'll pull them from the sides here. And I don't know them any better than any of the rest of us here, but we're going to learn the psukim on the sides a little bit as we move along, because we have to understand the shita of Rabbi Huda. So we've learned Rav Meir, who says that shchita and malika, that if you're molek and you find the animal a treifa, he says that there's no din of nevela, there's no tuma, and he learned it from the pasuk of zos Torah sabehema v'ha'ov. What about Rabbi Huda? We're halfway down on Samach Testament Beis. We're going to be stopping Emir Tashem toward the bottom of Ayin Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Huda, my taima. Why does Rabbi Huda hold? And you can just look at the top words of the page to find his shita. Why does he hold that if you do malika and it turns out the animal is a treifa, why does he say that there's still tuma? Kra, ashkach v'kadarash. He has a pasuk just like, as we saw, the similar language, same syntax by Rav Meir. The pasuk says nevela utreifa. So let's remember Vayikra Yud Zayin. I'll read the whole pasuk for you. V'chol nefesh asher tochal nevela utreifa. Anyone who eats a nevela or a treifa, ba'ezrach uvager, if they were a citizen, if they were already a Jew or they were a convert, v'chibes begadav, they have to wash their clothes. V'rachatz b'mayim v'tamei ad ha'ara v'taher. Then they have to wash their clothes. They'll be tamei until night, and then they'll become tahor. So the pasuk says nevela utreifa. So what does that teach me? That if there's a treifa, then there's nevela, right? So that's how he learns the pasuk. Very kind of a simplistic reading of the pasuk. We'll soon see that it's not such a simplistic reading of the pasuk. Amar Rabbi Huda, treifa lama nemra. Remember, this is our Rabbi Huda in the Mishnah. Our Rabbi Huda who says that malak v'nimseis treifa is going to be metame, that there's still a din of nevela. Well, let's see how he learns the pasuk. What does the word treifa mean in this pasuk that we just learned of Vayikra Yud Zayin? It says nevela utreifa lama nemra. Why do I even need the word treifa in the pasuk? Says Rabbi Yehuda. After all, mimanavshach im treifa chaya. If a treifa is able to live. Now, normally when we talk in learning, a treifa is an animal that has some type of illness or malady that we know it's going to die within 12 months. That's typically what we assume. But that's actually subject to a machlokes tanoim in, where is it? I think it's in, I don't remember where it is. It's on the side here. Yes, plugta. Rashi says it's in chulin. So says the Gemara, im treifa chaya, if a treifa can still live even though it's a treifa, then when it in fact dies, who cares about the treifa status? It didn't die because of that. Harei nevela amura. So then the word treifa is not helpful. If the treifa can live, then it doesn't matter. And im treifa eina chaya, harei hi bichlal nevela. And if a treifa won't live 12 months, it still is begeder nevela. And Rashi goes through how all of this is possible. So what then is the point of the word treifa? After all, both cases of the treifa living and the treifa not living, they both fall under the category of nevela. So why have the word treifa? Ella, says the Gemara, and this is the clincher to understand the sheet. This is the conclusion of the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda, that it must therefore be Ella, and we're a little bit more than halfway down, almost 2/3 of the way down. Lahavi treifa sheshachta shemitama. That if you have a treifa and you did malika, and that's how you found out it was a treifa, guess what? It's tameh. How do we know? Because we have an extra word treifa in the pasuk of treifa unevela and vayikra yud zayin. So that's the baseline of the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that because of the pasuk of nevela utreifa and the extra word of treifa, because we really don't need that word, elamai, why did the Torah say that word? To teach me that malak v'nim says treifa, that the halacha is that it still has the nevela tuma, the tumas nevela. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Amar le Rav Shezvi. Rav Shezvi says, hold on 1 second. Now Rav Shezvi, it says Amar le, it looks like he's talking to Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Shezvi was an Amora, so he wasn't talking to Rabbi Yehuda. That's why there's a little bit of a note on the side. It says, Rav Shezvi le Rabba. And in fact, it indicates that earlier it said Amar Rabba, Rabbi Yehuda, Kra Ashkach v'Kadarsh, because Rav Shezvi couldn't possibly have spoken to him. So that's why when you look up a little bit higher, when it says Rabbi Yehuda my taima, it should say Amar Rabba, Rabbi Yehuda Kra Ashkach v'Dar. So anyways, Amar le Rav Shezvi, he says back to Rabba, who presented this answer of Nevela Utreifa for Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara says as follows, Elameata, if what you're saying is that word Treifa in the pasuk of Nevela and Treifa is extra, then there's another pasuk that uses the word Treifa, and according to your logic, the word treifa there should be extra too. Says the Gemara as follows: Dichsiv v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa. This pasuk is in Vayikra Zayin. Our first pasuk that we learned, that was our source for Rabbi Yehuda, was Vayikra Yud Zayin. This is Vayikra Zayin. Let's read the whole pasuk. V'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa ye'aseh l'chol malacha ve'achol lo sochluhu. So it refers to both of them. The chelev, the fats of a nevela, of an animal that was nisnabel, or the chelev of a treifa, an animal that had one of the built-in treifos. So the Gemara says you're not allowed to eat that. So says the Gemara, hasam nami nema, perhaps over there we should say the same mimanavshach, that im treifa chaya harei nevela amura, im treifa ena chaya harei bichlal nevela. Ella, what then was the point of that word of treifa? L'chora, it's extra. Perhaps, says the Gemara, it's lahavi treifa, to include a case of an animal that's a treifa sheshachta, shechelba, tahor. Maybe we should have inferred from that extra word treifa a chiddush case, because the word treifa is extra. If you, Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabba's version of Rabbi Yehuda, if you learned that the word treifa in the pasuk of nevela utreifa was extra, and it could be darshan that way, then guess what? That was in Vayikra Yud Zayin. Then in Vayikra Zayin, we have the same possible drasha of learning the word treifa in a different way. And maybe what I would then learn is that if there was a treifa and I did a shchita on that animal, maybe what I could learn from there is shechel batahor. So even extra word, teach me a chiddush. So that's what the Gemara says. And then there's a big problem with this, because if we learn the pasuk in Vayikra Zayin of v'chelev nevela, v'chelev treifa, if we learn it this way, to teach me that treifa sheshachta shechel batahor, that the chelev of that animal is going to be tar, that's a big problem. Because michlal, that implies that there's a chiddush that the chelev is mutter. It implies michlal, the hi tmeya, that the animal is tmeya and the chelev is tahor. That does not work. And that is going to be a big problem for the Shita of Rabbah, whose understanding in Rabbi Yehuda was that the word Treifa in Vayikra Yud Zayin was extra. If the Vayikra Yud Zayin was extra with the word Treifa, then the same Treifa, the same Svar is going to apply in Vayikra Zayin. And that's a problem because of the way you darshan that pasuk in Vayikra Zayin. Because you can't say that the drasha is right, that the chaylev is going to be tahor, but the animal from which it comes, that the animal will be tameh. Why can't you say that? Because ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda amar Rav. This happened a lot in the early centuries of the Amoraim. We weren't sure if it was Rav, who was Rav Tanu Palik, or if it was actually a Brisa. There was a lot of confusion in the earlier years. You don't see this with like Rav Ashi. You don't see that 250 years later. They had a lot more clarity like that. It says the Gemara, what did Rabbi Yehuda Marav say, or the Brisa? Says the Gemara, the pasuk says, "V'chi yamus min habehema." This is a pasuk in Vayikra Yud Aleph. The pasuk reads, "V'chi yamus min habehema asher hilachem leochla hanogeh b'nivlasa itma ha'arav," that you would become tamei for touching its carcass. It says the Gemara, "Mikzas behema mitama." Part of the animal is going to make you tamei. Mikzas behema eno mitama, and some of the animal is not going to make you tamei. So it says the Gemara, "Ve'ezo zo." What is that case? Zo treifa sheshachta. That is a case of an animal that was treif, that was shechted. So your drasha that you learned from Vayikra Zayin of the extra word treifa does not work because we learned it somewhere else already. We learned it from Vayikra Yud Aleph v'chiyamus min habehema. So your potential drasha of Vayikra in Vayikra Zayin to say that the extra word treifa teaches me that the chaylev of the animal is mutter while the animal itself is min. No, we already learned that in Vayikra Yud Aleph. Ella treifa mi boile lemiut itmeya. Therefore, the extra word of treifa is not to learn what we just said from Vayikra Zayin. It was not to teach us that the chaylev was mutter, but rather that the treifa, the extra word of treifa, was there to teach me about an animal that was itself tmeya, not a treifa. The animal was a pig, a horse, an animal that's tamei. It's not kosher. That's totally different drasha. And says the Gemara, Mi sheyesh b'mina treifa. What would then be something that we could talk about? Only something that could be a treifa. Yatzis azu, but an animal that's tmeya could never be a treifa. She'ein b'mina treifa. A pig is never a treifa. We say the word treif. That's our parlance. It's tmeya. The animal is tmeya. It's not a kosher animal. Hachanami, so too by the pasuk of Rabbi Yehuda and Vayikra Yud Zayin. If treifa is talking about an animal that's tmeya, so too Hachanami by the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda wanted to use, lemuute of tamei she'ein b'mino treifa. So very sophisticated argument, and I'm just going to summarize in the following quick way. If you, Rabbi Yehuda, want to say that the word treifa in Vayikra Yud Zayin is extra, and therefore you want to say, we have a Mar Makom for our Mishnah, that Malak v'nimseis treifa is going to be Eino Matame. That's great. The problem is that if you say the word treifa is extra in Vayikra Yud Zayin, that means that the pasuk in Vayikra Zayin is also extra. But the only way to understand that pasuk, as we knocked out one option and came up with only one other one, is that the word treifa in Vayikra Zayin is if the animal is actually not kosher. And if that's what it means over there, then l'chora in your pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin, it also means that the animal is not kosher, which is not your case. Which means you don't have a Mari Makom anymore to tell me that Malak v'nimseis treifa is Eino Matama. So that's what the Gemara says. So that's the question on Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says, 5-6 lines from the bottom of the page, Of Tameh l'Rebbi Yehuda minivela nafkale. No, you think that the word treifa is teaching me about an of tameh. No, Rabbi Yehuda already learned that halacha. He learned about an of tameh in a whole nother space, in which case the word treifa is now still available for him to have his limud. Let's see how this plays out. Titania, we have a brisa. And what we're expecting to see in this brisa is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that an of tameh is learned from somewhere else. If we can find that shita, that an of tameh was learned somewhere else, that means the word treifa in Vayikra Yud Zayin is available for Rabbi Yehuda's original drasha. So here we go. The Tanya, 5 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yachol tehei nevelas of tameh mitama begadim abeis habliya. You might have thought that if there's a nevela of an animal that's tameh, that will cause for tumas beis habliya, it'll cause you tumas nevela. Talmud lomar nevelo treifa lo yochal. No. You can't become tameh with a nevela of an animal that's tameh. Why?
Because, says the Gemara, Misha Isuro Mishum Bal Tochal Nevela. The only time that you can become tamei for eating a nevela is if there's a din of nevela by that animal. You want to say there's a cow, a goat, a sheep, something that's kosher, we have a din of nevela. Yatza zeh, but when it comes to an animal that is bichlal not kosher, it's tamei. So then she'eni sur mishum bal tochal nevela, ela mishum bal tochal tamei, that's totally different. And therefore, here's what happens. Here's the development. The development is that we wanted to say, Rabbi Yehuda, you can't say Vayikra Yud Zayin works for you, the word treifa. Why? Because we learned from Vayikra Zayin that the word treifa is talking about an animal that's tameh. Therefore, your pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin is talking about an oaf tameh. Says Rabbi Yehuda, absolutely not. I already learned that from another brisa. And in that pasuk, I learned it from Nevelu Treifa Lo Yochal, our third pasuk referencing the word treifa. This pasuk is from Vayikra Chaf Beis. So now we have three psukim that we're dealing with. We have Vayikra Yud Zayin, that was Rabbi Yehuda's original Mara Malkum of Treifa. He said it was extra. From there we learn Malak V'nim says Treifa is going to be no din of Tuma. Comes along Rav Shezvi and says, no, you can't do that because Vayikra Zayin, it learns Treifa in a different way and it impacts how you learn the word Treifa. Says Mara, no, I'm fine. Rabbi Yehuda's like, I know how to learn. I got it. I figured this all out. So here's how Rabbi Yehuda would look at all the psukim. Vayikra Yud Zayin remains his pasuk that the word treifa is extra. From there he learns the din of our Mishnah that malak v'nim says treifa is einu matame when it comes to nevela. The second pasuk Taka does teach exactly like Rav Shezvi says. Does no skin off Rabbi Yehuda's back. He's totally fine. And the third pasuk over here that we have from Vayikra Chaf Beis teaches the din of an oaf tameh. So he's good kaftor v'ferach. He has his sheet is all lined up beautifully. And Rabbi Yehuda still has the word treifa to teach us what it is that we need. We're going to learn a couple of odds and ends, and then we're going to slightly, not so much, but a little bit switch gears. Says the Gemara on the top of Ayin Amud Aleph, heading toward the bottom of the page. Hi Nami Tepuk Li. This is also something that I could have learned out, that there's tuma in an animal. I could have learned this from V'chelev Nevela. This was the pasuk in Vayikra Zayin. This was the V'chelev Treifa, same pasuk. Misha Isur Mishum Baal Tochal Chelev, the word Nevela does not belong in this Gemara, that's a mistake. That Misha Isura Mishum Bal Tochal Chelev, Yatzis Azu She'en Isur Mishum Bal Tochal Chelev, and Nevela again is taken out, Ela Mishum Tameh. And basically what we see over here is that even according to Rav Shezvi, the way he used the word treifa to say that we're learning about an animal that's tameh, you don't even need to learn it from there. We could have learned that from different words from B'chelev and Nevela. So Rav Shezvi falls off the wagon. His question falls away, as we already established, but this was kind of like the nail on the coffin. And now Rabbi Yehuda has a very clean shita. In short, I know this is a very anticlimactic summary. Vayikra Yud Zayin, the word treifa, that's his Mari Makom. Malak when it says treifa is einu matame nevela. That's how the Gemara ends. So it says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Elahai treifa. What does he do with that? What about the treifa? What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the word treifa in Vayikra Zayin? So says the Gemara, mi boili isu yechaya. This is coming to talk about an animal that's in the category of a chaya, like a deer, for example, some of the smaller animals. So says the Gemara, Sal kadaita chamina. I might have thought in regards to a chaya that misha chel ba'asar uvsara mutter. I might have thought that the only time we have this halacha is when the chelev is aser and the animal's mutter, like by a behema. But by a chaya, maybe we would not have such a din. So therefore, we might have had a different din in our Mishnah. Had our Mishnah been talking about a chaya, yatzis azu, but a chaya is different. Shechel b'uvsar mutter kamash malan. But no, we might have thought, and that's why he says the word treifa is no different than our Mishnah. That Rabbi Yehuda says the treifa from Vayikra Zayin is teaching me about a chaya. So Amar Lei, he says, I don't understand. Says the Gemara, there are some remove this Amar Lei, because it's not really a dialogue here. So 6-7 lines down, the Gemara says, Maishna tmeya, the ein chelba chalak mi besara. If we have an animal that's tamei, we would make no distinction between its chelev and its basar. A pig, the chelev on the kidneys, the bacon, it's all the same thing. Whole thing is not kosher. Chayanami, I would have also thought, why? What a weird distinction of ein chel b'chalak mi b'sara. The Odin, furthermore, haksiv, the pasuk says in that very same pasuk where you wanted to say in Vayikra Zayin that treifa is talking about a chaya, but that very pasuk says ve'achol lo sochluhu. It's not edible anyways. Amar Abaye, what does the pasuk of Treifa in Vayikra Zayin coming to teach us. Elamar Abaye, Treifa legufe itzrich. We just need it for the basic part of the pasuk. It's not meant for a drasha. It's just meant to understand the pasuk straight up. Shelo tomar. Why do we need it for the basic part of the pasuk? So we should not say the following thing. Hol v'tmeya asura mechayim, utreifa asura mechayim. Just like a pig, an animal that's not kosher, is asur while it's alive, that a treifa is also asur from the time that it's alive. And matmeya chel batame, just like a non-kosher animal, the chelev is going to be tame. So then, af treifa chel batame. Then so too would the chelev of a treifa animal. Says the Gemara. Wait 1 second. Ihachi hanami mibai. If that's true, then we have a very big problem. If you say that Vayikra Zayin, the pasuk there of treifa is needed legufe, then maybe Rabbi Yehuda, his pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin, the one that we started with today, maybe by him, I shouldn't say we started with the one when we got to Rabbi Yehuda in the middle of Samach Tes and Beis, that first pasuk of Vayikra Yud Zayin, maybe there Hanami Miboy, that we would have the same problem. Let's first read that pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin. The pasuk says v'chol nefesh asher tochal nevela utreifa v'chulei, and it says that you're not allowed to eat it and you'll become tamei. So maybe we should have said hanami miboy, that we might have read that pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin the same way we read the pasuk in Vayikra Zayin, which is that the word treifa is legufe. Shelo tomar hol ve'ov tamei aser be'achila utreifa aser be'achila. That since a bird, let's take an ostrich or an eagle, that is not kosher at all, those are certainly predatory birds, and it's going to be usher to eat. So to a treifa would be therefore ma'of tameh eno metame, af treifa eno metama. And then we're back to a question on Rabbi Yehuda, because that means that we don't have the pasuk of treifa anymore because it's needed legufe. The Odin furthermore meika lemeilaf treifa mitmeya. We also, how do you ever learn these two things from one another? So says the Gemara, Tmeya lo haisa lo shas kosher. You can't learn a treifa from a tmeya. A tmeya never had a moment when it was kosher. I saw an eagle. We had an eagle in our neighborhood like 2 years ago. It was unbelievable. Every animal around knew exactly what was going on. It was crazy. There was this scurrying of all the animals. So I'm looking up there, this huge eagle, massive wingspan. The animal's a treifa. The animal's a tmeya, excuse me. It's not kosher at all. The eggs are tmeya. Everything's tamei about it. So it says the Gemara, tmeya, an animal that's not kosher, lo hayisa la shasa kosher. It never had a chance. There wasn't even a single moment in its life where it could have been shechted and eaten. But a treifa, before it became a treifa, it was a chicken. It was a pigeon. Whatever, it was a dove. Tmeya hayisa lo shas kosher. Ay v'chitema. Treifa mi beten. Maybe there was an animal that was born that way. Okay, we understand that. Ma'ika l'meimer says the Gemara, but still, b'mina miha'ika. Even if it's true that the animal was born with a treifa, but a chicken in general is shaykh to be eaten. You're right, this one wasn't shaykh to be eaten. But the Gemara is bothered by the fact that we're trying to learn from tmeya to treifa. So it says the Gemara, Elo Amar Rava, HaTorah Amra, Yavo Iser Nevela, V'yachol al Iser Chelev, Yavo Iser Treifa, V'yachol al Iser Chelev. That what we're seeing from Rava over here is that really this is not a problem. And we're okay learning these two psukim. What we're saying that we're allowed to do over here, and this does trigger other conversations that we're not going to have right now, is that we do allow the stacking of different isurim in this particular case. So it says the Gemara, let's read it again. HaTorah Amar, Yavo Iser Nevela, we have Nevela, V'yachol al Iser Chelev. You can have a double Iser. And Yavo Iser Treifa, V'yachol al Iser Chelev. Now, not Tmeya, because Tmeya is not Shaykh, but we are able to stack these isurim, which is very unique because we have these types of things, but we're not going to learn the sugya now, nor do I know the answer. Halfway down, v'tzriche, and says the Gemara that according to Rava, we need both of these types of languages. The iyashmu'inan nevela, if I would have only had nevela, well, that's different than a treifa, because a nevela mishum demitamya, a nevela can make other things tameh. Aval treifa imalo, but I might have thought that when it comes to a treifa is not metame other things. It's usher to eat, but it's not like nevela that can cause tuma for other things. It's very narrow. The treifa is limited to itself. The nevela can spread tuma to others. So therefore, we need to have a double language. And v'yashmuin and treifa, if I would have only had the language of treifa, mishum de isura mechayim. Well, you can't have a nevela when an animal is alive, but you can have a treifa when an animal is alive. Aval nevela imalo tzrichi. Now, for the last little chunk of Gemara, we're going to go very rapidly back and forth in Shakla B'Tarya to understand how Rav Meir understood Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda had this whole, his shita was actually simple. Rav Shezvi made it complicated by comparing and contrasting with other versions of treifa from Vayikra Zayin, Vayikra Chav Beis. So it says Gemara, Rav Meir, hold on one second. I know what Rav Yehuda holds. Rav Meir, remember what Rav Meir held. That was how our Mishnah started. Rav Meir held that Malak v'nimtzeis treifa, no tumas nevela. So it says the Gemara, Rav Meir, if Rabbi Yehuda learned the word treifa to say that you were takachayev, that you would have a problem of tuma, Rav Meir, hi treifa, my avidle. Well, what did he do? Rav Meir held that there was no nevela. Rabbi Yehuda says there is an isser nevela if malak v'nim says treifa from the word treifa. So what does Rav Meir do with this? Hi treifa, my avidle, says the Gemara, mi boile l'mu'ute shchita shehi lifnim. This is coming to teach us of a case of a bird that was chulin, and you shechted it inside. So it's teaching a totally unrelated din, but not a kasha that remains. Rabbi Yehuda, well, what do you do about that? It says Gemara treif achrin ksiv, and here on the side, thank God, it tells us what pasuk it is. This from Vayikra Chav. He has another pasuk of treifa to teach us the din about the oaf that was shechted inside. V'Rav Meir, now we have two treifas. We have the treifa of Vayikra Yud Zayin, and we have the treifa of Vayikra Chav Beis. So what do you do with both treifas? So Rameir, like we saw, the of Tameh. One was to teach us that an of Tameh would also not be Matame because of Nevela. Rabbi Yehuda, where do you learn that from? This extra din of of Tameh that it's not going to be Matame Nevela. He learns it from the pasuk Mi Nevela Nafkale. This pasuk is from Vayikra Chav Beis. The pasuk says Nevelu Treifa Lo Yochal Latama Ba Ani Hashem. So there he says that of Tameh would not have a status of Nevela. V'Rav Meir. Hi nevela my avidle. You already learned of tameh from the second treifa from Vayikra Chav Beis. So what do you do with the word nevela? Rav Yehuda needed that pasuk. You don't need that pasuk. Rav Meir hi nevela my avidle says the Gemara l'shiur achila bekezayis, to teach me that when is it that you become tameh with nevela? Not with the first swallow of the nevela. You have to eat a shiur of a kezayis. So you swallow something that's tameh. But until there's a shiur of tuma, says Rav Meir, you're not tameh yet. The tepukle mikra kama midafke rachmana b'lashon achila. You should have learned it from pasuk and the pasuk that you started with Vayikra Yud Zayin, because there the pasuk has a language of achila. The pasuk reads in Vayikra Yud Zayin the chol nefesh asher tochal, and we know that achila is always a shiur. So why did you need to use up the word nevela when the pasuk Rabbi Yehuda that you yourself started with today has a language of achila? So says the Gemara beautifully, Chad l'shir achila bekezayis, the Chad l'shir achila bichdei achilas pras. Says the Gemara, according to Reb Meir, there's two features to becoming tameh with the Beis Habliya. Feature number one is you ate the right shiur, and feature number two is that you ate it fast enough. Bichdei achilas pras. Whatever the poskim discuss what this is, halacha l'maisa for those who eat b'shiur man Yom Kippur, high risk pregnancies, people, whatever the case may be. So he says it's a double din. Din number one, you have to eat enough. Din number two, you have to eat it fast enough. If you eat your nevela too slow, you're not matame beis habliya. You need both dinim of achila. You have to eat it, a kazayas, and you have to eat it fast enough. Sal kadai tachamina. Why do I need a pasuk for that? Isn't that everything? Wait, you're going to be bench. You're going to bench only if you ate bichdei achilas pras. You have to eat fast enough. That's why I like try with my children. Eat the whole slice before you get up and get your food. Eat the whole slice, trying. It doesn't always work. Those people are not chayiv in benching. You see these people dieting all the time. They take a little meal. You're not chayiv in benching. Zero. Don't bench. It's probably a brachos levatala one after the next. You're only chayiv in benching if you eat a kazayis of bread b'chdei achilas pras. So that's why also, by Kiddush also, you're not chayiv in a bracha achrona if your mazonos is spread out over a half hour. Eat your kazayas fast. Just pound it. That's how you know you're chayiv in a bracha achrona. Otherwise, you should not make a bracha achrona. You have no bracha achronim, or you lost it. So says the Gemara, what's the havamina that I would need to say b'chdei achilas pras? Of course, is regular halacha. Shtein Shulchan Aruch. The only way you're going to be chayiv in something is if you eat it b'chdei achilas pras. Al kadai tachamina, says the Gemara, and with this we're going to close. Since this whole thing is a chiddush, well, what's the chiddush? The chiddush of Beis Habliya. It's not a normal way to become tameh. Since the Torah was mechadesh by a bird that you can swallow a food and become tameh, I might have thought that there was a chiddush, that the shiur of kazai supplied, but even if you ate it yoser michdei achilas pras, you ate it over that half hour, maybe you're still chayv kamash malon. That's why he says we need multiple explanations over here. Multiple psukim, says Rav Meir. One to teach me that this chiddush idea is not enough. You still need the achila of a kizayis, and you also need the achila of bichtei achilas pras. We'll stop right here at Tanu Rabbanan, 8 lines from the bottom on Ayin Amud Aleph, and Yirtzeh Hashem will pick up tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.